Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. My name is Walt Thiessen. This is a recording of the first ever broadcast of LOA Today, which was broadcast on Wednesday, September 26, 2012, with co-hosts Walt Thiessen and Louise Thiessen.
Okay. We are now on the air. We just did 10 minutes of blank airtime.
Sorry about that, folks. Like we said, as you'll hear now, we are new at this. And my techno pro over here is still learning how to make this radio show work.
But welcome to the first, now newly starting broadcast of LOA Today here on LOAtoday.net. We were hoping that this was going to get off to a great start without a glitch, but no, that's not the way it works. So we are now getting started. But
I'm hearing music.
Yeah, you're hearing the feedback from this. I can stop that.
Oh, okay.
First, let's start with what we've tried to do like the last 10 minutes, but nobody heard about it. So we're going to start right now with what we're trying to accomplish. Why did we even start this? Well, it's one of those things that just kind of happened in our lives the way things often happen. It happened as sort of both of us coming up with the same thing at the same time, and we're often on that same wavelength where we just come up with the same ideas. We're thinking the same music. We're thinking about all the same stuff. Louise has passed me a good note to think about. Who are we? That's a good point. Well, my name is Walt Thiessen.
And I'm Louise Thiessen.
And
we are husband and wife.
And we're celebrating our 13th wedding anniversary today. So it's auspicious that we're celebrating our anniversary, and we're starting a new venture with this radio show. Absolutely. And the whole thing got started when, what was it, about 2 months ago, we both came to the same realization at the same time that we wanted to do something with law of attraction. We wanted to make sure that we were able to do what we've been doing in our everyday lives, but we also wanted to tie it into something bigger, and we weren't sure what, something that would reach out. And we both came up with this idea. I don't know how we did this. How do we end up on the same wavelength on these things? But we came up with the same idea of doing an online radio show.
Well, I know for me, for many years, I've wanted to work with a partner, be it back when I was a therapist and wanted to do co-therapy with somebody, when I had my garden business and having somebody to work side by side. I know I like the give and take of working with somebody, and it just never worked out. So when we got started discussing the law of attraction and wanting to do something that would bring us in touch with even more people and where we could share what we were learning, it just seemed natural that it would be you and I, because we sit on the couch at night and we have these discussions about what we've read or what we want to do or encourage each other. So to sit in front of a microphone and to be able to share with other people made a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That is what we do a lot of the time, and that is where this whole idea did grow out of the idea that we just kind of sit on the couch and talk about this stuff. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun for us anyway. We enjoy it, and we figure, well, maybe other people might enjoy it too. So you're right. That's kind of the impetus of the thing. But we have a few things we want to try to do. One of them is basically just having the show so we can talk about our experiences, positive and negative, things that have worked out well, things we've stumbled upon, and also talk about other people's experiences, because we don't claim to be experts on this. I mean, we're still learning this. I consider myself to be a student. I think you consider yourself the same.
Still a novice. Still a novice.
Absolutely. So that's the way we're approaching the whole thing. And we want to bring other people in, too. We do plan to have a call-in section. That segment still isn't quite ready for the same reason that we missed the first 7 minutes of broadcast here, because I'm still learning the technology. I got to tell a quick story. It's not an LOA story, but I got to tell it anyway.
Sure.
You go to, we're using the Shoutcast server, which is an open-source server maintained by America Online. And you go to their website and you find where you can learn to be a broadcaster, and they say this takes 30 minutes to set this thing up. And so I went through the process, and
Yeah, I kind of got something set up in about 30 minutes, but it wasn't anything close to what you might recognize as a radio station. Let me tell you, it's a lot more difficult than what they tell you. And I actually know the web pretty well. That's what I do for a living, and this has been an adventure. I guess that's what I'm saying. This has been a real adventure trying to learn how this stuff works. Well, the same thing is true for the call-in portion. We actually do have a way to connect the calls in, but the signal's been weird. We've been getting choppy voices and so forth. So we want to get all that ironed out before we have anybody call in. And we do want that because of two things. First of all, we're going to have some guests. We're going to try and invite guests to join us on the program. And more importantly, we're going to have co-hosts joining us.
Yahoo! Because part of the reason we wanted to do this was to connect with other people. It's one thing we sit and we talk about it, but we feel isolated, and we don't know everything. We don't have all the resources, and we can't always just motivate each other.
Right.
We need people who are farther along in the process to help be mentors and to share our experiences and get motivation wherever we can. And we're guessing that a lot of you out there are in the same position because most of us in our everyday lives are so surrounded by negativity with the people we work with, maybe within our families, with the TV, with the newspaper, that it's hard to find people who are willing to have a serious discussion about how to go about making a positive change in their lives and reaching big and wide and far and dreaming and not just giving you lip service. And that's what we're hoping that we're going to be able to create here. As well as you said, having presenters, we want a chance to talk about some of the authors who have impacted our lives, presenters who we haven't been to any community or outside presentations, but we've been fortunate enough to find some videos of presentations on YouTube. And one of the ones that has really struck home with us is a gentleman named Mike Dooley. And he's had a major impact in our lives in the past. We found him about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, you know more about his background.
Well, Mike Dooley, anybody who's ever watched The Secret or read the book will recognize Mike Dooley from that presentation because he's the one who talks about thoughts become things. And he's also the one who does the great riff about look at the back of your hands and look at every pore, every hair on the back of them, and then imagine them as they're wrapping around the steering wheel of your brand new car. Followed by the sequence where you see this guy sitting in his couch, imagining that he's driving this sports car. And he's with his eyes closed. He's waving to people as he's driving down his imaginary road and having a great time. It's one of the best portions of the whole movie. So, and that gives you an idea of what Mike Dooley is like too. If you've ever seen him, you know he is one of the most dynamic, energized, enthusiastic, positive people you will ever hear. You don't even have to believe in law of attraction to like this guy, because he's just so full of enthusiasm. It's unbelievable.
And he uses a lot of humor in his presentations. We've watched his videos some evenings after dinner, and after a long day, and I'm tired and kind of dragging, and by the time the video was over, I was like, I can't go to sleep. I'm all keyed up now. I'm all hyped and psyched and ready to go. And whereas an hour before, I was dragging my butt across the floor.
It's funny, though, you mentioned that, because one of the reasons we started listening to him late in the evening was so that we could have something positive in our minds, particularly in our subconscious, as we're getting ready to go to sleep. And I don't know about you, we haven't really talked about this lately, but it has had an impact on me. Anytime that we've listened to these videos or done reading from the books or whatever and spent like a good hour or so before we go to sleep, invariably I sleep really well. When I remember my dreams, they're positive dreams for a change, because over the last few years my dreams have been so negative. Now they're turning positive. That's like really good. So I know for a fact that it's had an impact.
Well, I was sharing with you this morning, dream I awoke from this morning.
That's right.
And you pointed out the significance of it. And I'm not going to go into detail right now because we have too many other things to talk about. But the theme of the dream was abundance. And it's like, oh, yeah, it was. And I'll have to pay more attention to my dreams because I haven't as far as positive and negative. I just have been having weird dreams anyway, but what's the theme? Is it more of on a positive note or a negative note?
What an appropriate topic, though, for your dream, considering you know and your subconscious knew that we were going to be doing this today. So it was like your last sleep before this happens. And what does it tell you about? Yeah, that's do. There's just a little bit of Twilight Zone going on there.
Well, one of the things we wanted to do, this being our first broadcast, was to talk a little bit about how each of us comes to be interested in the law of attraction and what our own experiences have been. Well, if it's okay with you, I'll start.
Okay.
And my first one is very apropos because today is our 13th wedding anniversary. And one of the most significant law of attraction experiences I had in my lifetime was about 6 months before I met you. I had lost my beloved cat of 16 years, and any of you who are pet owners know how dear your pets, especially if you've had them for a long period of time, can be. And my cat died in November. I think it was that January. I was talking to somebody, and they said, "Oh, are you going to get another cat?" And I said, "No, I think I'll get a husband." Obviously, I was single at that time. Well, lo and behold, within 4 or 5 months, I was introduced to my lovely husband, Walt, sitting here next to us. And the person that I said, back up. I started asking people if they knew men, and not just any man. I had specific requirements. And in
fact, you had a written list.
Well, I hadn't checked that in a while, but that was as an assignment when I was in graduate school on if you are looking for a partner, spouse, mate, whatever, that you need to know what you're looking for. So we had written out lists. I had tucked it away. But I was avidly asking people, do you know somebody who might fit these attributes? And against what so many people tell you, that you find somebody when you're not looking. Well, you find somebody when you find somebody is how I've come to look at it. And maybe it was because I had stated very positively, I think I'll get a husband, that happened. And the person who introduced me to you was not somebody I thought would know somebody that I would be interested in, because she and I had very, very different lifestyles and interests. But lo and behold, you were the first person that came to her mind. And
that's long been a real surprise to me, because the person you're talking about, I had the same association with. I never expected that she would introduce me to somebody that I would really click with, because her lifestyle and mine were so different. And there's the same situation. You and I both had the same kind of indirect kind of distant relationship with her, but it was enough.
She was the conduit. She knew both of us, and she didn't hesitate when I asked. Your name was the first one out of her mouth. So we want to give a shout out to Debbie in Connecticut and thank her on this, our anniversary, for introducing us.
Absolutely, Debbie. If you're listening, thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future when we get up to Connecticut, because that's one of our plans. So, yeah, absolutely. Another story. I started paying attention to, I had been aware of positive thinking for many years, but I had kind of given up on it. Back around late 1980s or so, I just decided at that point it just wasn't doing anything. And I have to admit, I didn't fully understand it, and I didn't fully understand how you could actually undermine the achievement of your own goals through the same process. It wasn't really explained well at those times. I think it's only in the last few years it's really been explained well, because at that time, basically you were just told, well, think positively and positive things happen. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to put more into it than that. There's more involved in that. It's not quite that straightforward and simple.
Plus, we've learned that there's the emotional component that's so vital. It's not just thinking. it's not just thinking, you have to feel, and then you have to act. You just can't think and things will happen.
That's right.
As Mike Dooley says, you got to get off the couch.
Yeah.
You got to take the car out of park, if you want to get to your goals. You can't just think about it.
I love that riff that we saw of him. I can't remember which video it was, but he was giving the presentation and he was playing the role of the person who was very depressed because he still wasn't wealthy and he was still overweight and he hadn't met that special someone yet and he wasn't sure what was going wrong and, maybe I'll just go watch The Secret again.
Watching The Secret is good, but then you have to go and act. Action is a vital part of that, of this whole process.
I love Mike's take on that, too. He says it doesn't even matter so much what the action is, baby steps. And you can even be going in the wrong direction at first. It doesn't matter because you'll get clues right away you're going in the wrong direction.
You got to do something. And I've experienced that with jobs. I don't like this job. I've got to do something else. Well, there was that old thing, you don't leave one job till you have another,
right.
Or you don't leave this job until you get the job. Well, I learned, forget all that. Sometimes you start looking, you start interviewing, you start telling people, and then the opportunity that you're looking for will present itself. But if you just sit and complain and moan, nothing will change.
The other thing I like that he has found a number of different ways to explain, and indeed most of the LOA secret type teachers have found really interesting ways to explain this. But I particularly like the way he does it. He talks about how, for instance, with the example that I gave of the guy who was moaning and groaning because nothing was happening in his life. And if anyone has ever, by the way, if you haven't subscribed to his Notes from the Universe, subscribe to it. You can get to it at tut.com. It's free, and it's well worth it. It gives you a nice pick-me-up every day. And in fact, those Notes from the Universe are really what raised him to his levels of fame. Today he has over 500,000 people who get those notes every day. But it started with a very small list of people he had from a T-shirt business that he was selling. That's what TUT.com stands for. Apparently it's totally unique T-shirts. And that failed business became a very successful business for him in terms of being the motivational speaker that he became. But the thing that he teaches so nicely is every time that you bemoan that things aren't working, your wish comes true. The universe...
Don't you hate that?
It's tough when the universe keeps coming at you with the 2x4s you keep requesting over and over again.
Well, that's what's called the law of attraction. You will get whatever you're attracting. So if you're negatively focused, that's what will keep showing up at your door and in your life.
In fact, I was looking at the website powerfulintentions.org, which you might check out if you don't know about it already. It's a good place to kind of connect with other people who are very much into the whole LOA thing. But there was one guy who had been a practitioner for a number of years. Well, actually, I'm not sure what the time period was, but he had posted very recently that he was about ready to give up on the whole thing because every time that he tried to do something positive, think positively, think positive about getting more money, about finding the right relationship, whatever it might be, it always came back to him negative. And I believe the discussion is still going on there. I tried leaving a note. I don't think he paid any attention to me because he was only looking for answers from somebody who had actually made $1 million through LOA. But the thing that struck me about what he said was it always comes back negative. Now, he was trying to propose the idea LOA is just a scam. That's what his message was all about, that it's all just a scam for people to make money on. But here's the thing that I think proves that he's wrong from his own testimony. He said every time he tried to do something positive, he got a negative result. I mean, if LOA was truly nonsense, I would expect it to be random. So sometimes you get a positive result, sometimes you get a negative result, and there'd be no correlation. I mean, the idea that every single time he got a negative result, that to me is an astonishing result.
Well, with my psychology background, I'm thinking, okay, what was his underlying thinking?
Oh, yeah.
And was he self-sabotaging?
He probably was.
Because, like you said, the law of averages, he would something positive would happen at least once.
Just out of randomness.
Right. So there's something, we don't have all the information.
No, we don't. Sure. No. And this isn't about trying to solve his problem for anyway.
No,
but it was interesting. And I mentioned powerfulintentions.org in part because it's a good place to connect, to find out more about what other people are experiencing and feeling. But it's also just a good place to put out your own feelers to the world and take your first steps. Because if the whole idea is to take baby steps so that you can give the LOA process a chance to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, well, what better place to do it than through an online forum with sympathetic ears? Mm-hmm. So that just strikes me as a really good place for people to go to get started. Right. So there's a resource for you.
We wanted to share with you something that happened to us, where are we now, the end of September, so a month and a half ago. We had visitors. More specifically, Walt's brother, Mark, and his girlfriend, Iona, who's from Trinidad. Some of Iona's family members were visiting in the States for several weeks. 6 weeks, I think
Something
it was,
like that,
6 or 7 weeks. And Mark and Iona live in Ohio. But her family wanted to come east, and we live outside of D.C., so they wanted to come and were most anxious to see Washington, D.C. And so they came. And we had planned to spend a day in the city. And we were going in during the week. And any of you who live in the greater D.C. metro area know that driving into D.C. or trying to get anywhere near D.C. during the week is crazy. So we wanted to take the metro, if at all possible, because we knew, one, the traffic into the city would be terrible, and two, where on earth were we going to park? And we'd probably have at least 2 vehicles because there were 10 of us. So, why don't you tell them the research you did as far as finding parking for us?
Well, the first thing I did was the internal research, in which I tried to convince myself that all was not lost, despite the fact that, like you say, that the D.C. commute is a horrendous commute, nationally known for being really one of the worst commutes in the nation. And I had to overcome that and say to myself, hey, to heck with that. We're going to get what we need.
We got to find. There's going to be some way.
There's just going to be some way. We don't know what the answer is yet, but we're going to put out the positive thought, and we're going to take the baby steps and see what we can find. So once I got myself out of the negative mindset into the positive mindset, which took a lot of doing. We'll talk about that one a little bit later on too, because that's a really big thing. The challenge that it can often be to get from that negative to the positive. But once I'd gotten myself there, I finally said, okay, well, let's go online and see what I can find out, because I like finding almost anything online. Did some research, and everything I was finding was basically reinforcing, well, this isn't going to work. So I ended up calling the Metro Authority themselves. The Metro Authority, of course, runs the metro system in Washington, D.C., as well as the bus system. And got somebody on the line from customer service and explained the problem and told her, I know what it's like when, the parking lots, especially at the metro stations, fill up like 7 a.m. They're all done, and you just can't get a spot. How on earth can we do this? Because we want to be able to take these visitors from Trinidad into D.C. so they can have the national capital experience. And she said, oh, well, there is one thing you might do. We have these reserved spots. These reserve spots are normally paid for by people who want to be guaranteed a place to park. They pay a monthly fee in addition to the parking fee for having these reserved spots. And I know for a fact that the Vienna station, which is the one you'd be going into, has some spots that aren't currently rented. Now, I can't tell you how many there are, she says. I can't tell you how many will be available at any time because we never know. But that would be a good chance for you to get in there and get into the city. I said, oh, cool. That sounds really good.
But there's a piece you're leaving out in that at 10 o'clock in the morning, those reserved spots that are not occupied are open to anybody.
That's right.
To you.
That's
they
right.
become free agents, so to speak, so anybody can park in them.
So we said, okay, well, we're going to get on our positive frame of mind, and we're just going to go, and we're going to trust that the universe is going to deliver this to us.
And we were going to need 2 spots because we were driving 2 cars.
Yep. So we drove to Vienna, which is roughly 15, 20 minutes outside of D.C., and came to the metro station and started to drive through. And I was kind of in the lead car. Louise was back with Mark in the car behind. And I was just basically trying to find the signs that led us to the reserved parking because I wasn't really sure where it was.
And I wondered what you were doing because you came in to the parking area where we used to park and you just kept going. And it's like, well, why isn't he doing something?
Well, because I was pretty sure that the reserved spots weren't there. I was pretty sure they were closer to the entrance. I just wasn't sure where they were.
And I wasn't traveling in the vehicle with Walt. I was in the vehicle his brother was driving, so we weren't in communication. And we're on the same wavelength on a lot of things, but I definitely haven't learned how to read his mind all the time. So I did not know what he was up to, and I was a bit confused.
Yeah. Well, you weren't the only one. I was a bit confused myself. So that's why we were basically circumnavigating the entire center for the Vienna parking lot system. And we ended up moving all the way around it while I'm looking for signs for the reserved parking. And I actually did see one sign. It said, keep going this way, so I kept going. And then I didn't see any more signs for it. And we got to the point where we're running out of parking lot. And I'm thinking, well, where's the reserved parking? Well, didn't know what else to do. I kind of stopped. I was trying to figure out what to do. And I saw there was this bus sitting on the side of the road, a commuter bus, waiting for passengers. And so I decided to get out of the car and walk up and ask him if he knew where the reserved parking was. I did that. As I did that, you got out of the other car and you started walking over to the parking lot.
Well, we were on the road that circumnavigates the the whole metro area, metro center there, and station. And there were some signs that were back to me, and there were some empty spots in front of those signs. So I decided to walk over and see what the sign said. And this was the reserved parking area. And lo and behold, guess how many spaces were still available?
Two.
Not side by side, but 2 spots. So I called to Walt.
And as far as we know, these were the only 2 left in the entire parking lot because, I mean, it was just wall-to-wall cars as far as the eye could see.
And I motioned to Walt, and I said, I will stay here, and I will sort of protect these spaces. I wasn't going to let anybody park in these spaces. So he got back in his vehicle.
And we drove around to, it was about a half a block to where the entrance was. We got to the entrance, and there are 2 cars in front of us sitting in front of the entrance that you go through in order to get into the parking lot, but they weren't going in. And as we pulled up, I pulled up, and my brother was driving the other car. He pulled behind me. The guy in the front car had come walking back from the gate and was waving us off saying, there's no more room in the parking lot. Indeed, there was a sign there saying lot full.
Right, because they didn't know what we knew.
They didn't know what we knew. They basically hadn't gotten the information the universe had given us. So I kind of scoped out the situation, and I realized even though the cars were in front of us, they actually weren't so close to the gate that you couldn't get a car in front of them. So I said, okay, I'm going to be daring. So I drove around the cars, went in front of them into the lot. The gate went up. I went. Mark came behind me. We drove around to where you were, and we got the last 2 parking spaces in the parking lot.
I wonder what it would have been interesting if somebody in one of our 2 vehicles had seen the faces on those guys standing there as you and Mark drove past, ignoring them, and then didn't come back out.
Well, there's a part of me that feels sorry for them, but there's also a part of me that says, hooray for us, we did it.
We had the positivity that we would find them, and we did. Now, what Walt didn't share with you was the trip to get to the metro station.
Oh.
We knew we had to be there at 10 o'clock. That was the ultimate time to be there to get these spots because they become available at 10 o'clock. If they're not full, then anybody could use them. So we wanted to be there at 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about, an hour ride from here now to the station in
Depending
Vienna?
On the traffic, yeah.
And so we thought we had left plenty of time. Well, we probably had, except for about, 2 exits before we needed to get off, traffic ground to not a complete standstill, but to a very, very slow crawl. And my brother-in-law had seen one of those signs they now have along the highway that will tell you there's an accident up ahead or exit such and such is closed. and it said there was an accident 2 miles ahead. So we knew it was only 2 miles. And of course, we came to a semi-stop just beyond an exit that we're familiar with, that we could have gotten on surface streets and circumnavigated all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sitting in very slow-moving traffic, and I'm starting to get anxious because it's, 9:45 at this time.
Something like that.
And we still have 5 to 10 miles, I don't know exactly how far, to get. And we have this accident 2 miles ahead, not knowing if the accident just happened and we're going to have to sit while emergency vehicles come, or if it's been there for a while and they're going to be clearing it out soon. So I decided, instead of getting panicky, I thought to myself, well, I can't believe that the universe brought us all, with our Trinidadian visitors, to this spot on I-66 in Virginia to just sit here on a very hot day and not get where we wanted to go. So the universe was probably doing one of two things: protecting us from something up ahead that, if we had been traveling at normal speed, we might have been involved in.
Could be.
Or was slowing us down so that our timing for our needs to be met would be perfect. Well, lo and behold, it was at least the second one. We don't know so much about the first one, and we never will, but we certainly were at the train station at the optimum time and got those two spaces. And we are convinced that that was law of attraction and our positive thinking. And when we came to that slowdown on the road, it was basically, everybody think positively that we're going to get out of this. And I remember saying to myself, okay, it's just going to clear, everybody's going to get out of the way, and we're going to be able to move forward. Well, within 5 minutes, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, it wasn't like your typical accident scene where it just slowly clears itself out. You're right. It's as if it's like in those commercials that you see where all the traffic just clears out of the way. It's exactly the way it played out.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that in an actual experience on the highway, but that's precisely what happened.
They just all moved, and it was no log jam for miles and miles moving slowly.
It just moved right back up to normal speed, like it had never happened. Quite amazing. No doubt.
And we got to the train station, about 15, 20 minutes late?
Not even that. It was at most 10 minutes late.
Okay.
At most.
Not thinking that we were going to luck out, just that we were getting there when we were supposed to get there. And we did.
And we did. It happened.
So yay, LOA.
And according to the theory, LOA is always in operation, so that makes sense. But it is fun to focus on some of the things that have been particularly surprising. I remember a few years back, one of the first things that I noticed that happened that really caught my attention was medically related. This was, I first became aware of The Secret, and that's when I started getting involved in the whole idea of trying to explore LOA more closely. But I got involved in reading and watching the video about a year after it came out. So that would be, around 2007, I think it was. And that was in November of that year. The previous April, I had discovered that there was something on my left pinky knuckle.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was it was a cyst. I didn't know what it was. It was a red dot that was on the knuckle. And because of that thing being there, I was kind of reluctant to go to the doctor, but I knew I had to go to the doctor at some point. And I was also dealing with the fact that as it had always been the case in the past, I just didn't have a whole lot in the way of money. So it was one thing after another. I just didn't want to have to deal with it if I didn't have to. Well, ultimately, I did end up going to the doctor in September for a different situation. But while I was there, I said, "Hey, Doc, can you take a look at this?" And she looks at it and she says, "Oh, that's a cyst." And she looked it over carefully, and she says, "Yep, that's what it is. It's not a big deal," she says, "but you'll want to have it operated on because they don't go away, And it's a very simple operation. She said it's all in office. It won't take more than a half hour to an hour or so. Not that big of a deal at all, but you do want to get it done because the unfortunate thing about cysts is most of the time they remain benign, but if you don't do something about it, they can turn into something worse. So, just make some time over the next few weeks to do something about it. Well, I didn't. As usual, I didn't want to have to deal with it. I didn't even want to have to think about surgery. I didn't want to have to deal with any of it. So I just put it off. Now, it comes November, I start reading The Secret, start watching the video. And this is intriguing, I remember doing positive thinking before. It didn't really work, but this presentation is intriguing. It had me thinking about it. So by January, I said, well, geez, I wonder, what can I do to test this to see if LOA really works? And then I remembered that I had this cyst on my knuckle. And I said, well, they're talking about how you can use LOA to improve medical situations. I mean, they had stories about guys who had crashed airplanes and walked away from it after healing themselves, and a woman who had basically eliminated breast cancer by watching funny movies. I'm thinking, wow, if they can do that, maybe I can get rid of a cyst on my left pinky finger. So I tried really hard for a couple of weeks, and every day I looked at that pinky finger, and sure enough, that cyst was still there. It just wouldn't go away. And then I finally realized, oh, wait a minute, they said something. They said you don't want to focus on the thing you don't want. You want to focus on what you want. Well, I've been focusing on that cyst. And even if you're focusing on saying, go away, cyst, you're still focusing on the cyst. So I said, okay, well, I've got to have a way to visualize, because visualization is a big part of this, right? To visualize my left pinky finger without a cyst on it. How on earth do I do that? And I thought, well, I could get Photoshop. I could Photoshop it out, but that didn't really work for me. I wanted something that I could feel, that I could, make it really resonate with me. And then one of those shots of lightning hit me. Finally occurred to me, oh, wait a minute, I have another pinky finger, and it doesn't have a cyst on it. So I started looking at the right pinky finger and visualizing, this is the way my left pinky finger is. It looks just like this. It's completely free of any blemishes. It looks beautiful. And I focused on that for about 5 minutes, and then I lost interest because I didn't really see how it was going to work, but I had other things to do, and I forgot about it for about 3 weeks. And then one day I remembered it toward the end of January. I said, oh, yeah, what about that cyst? I looked at my finger, my left pinky finger, and it was gone. Now, wait a minute. The doctor told me cysts don't go away on their own. Where did that cyst go? The only thing I can think is it had to be what I did deliberately trying to apply LOA. I can't see any possible way to it. Now, I have to admit, I haven't done research to find out, was the doctor right? I mean, maybe there are stories of cysts going away. I haven't checked that out. But when the doctor tells you something, I mean, you kind of believe it, especially when she says it with some authority.
Right.
And I believed it. So, take it whatever way you want to. I think I made that cyst go away.
Well, I've learned over the years not to believe everything doctors tell you, because I had one tell me that something I had on my just below my bottom lip was scar tissue. And I'm like, scar tissue? Well, scar tissue comes from having an accident or an injury, a cut or something, and I'd never had that. And I just was like, this doctor doesn't know what she's talking about. And I think it was a cyst also.
Oh.
And it was probably a year later, I ended up with a pimple right near that. And in dealing with that pimple, it opened up a little hole in the skin, and out popped this little, it looked like probably wax or something, which may be what a cyst was, a little ball. And that was what was stuck in my skin, and it was gone. I didn't have to have it surgically removed. I didn't have to have it frozen. I didn't have to have
Well, apparently you did. You apparently did LOA surgery because it surgically came out.
Surgically came out. So I don't believe everything doctors tell me.
Yeah.
And especially with the law of attraction, I'm very much into I can keep myself healthy, and I don't need to be sick. I don't need illnesses, and I am well. And something Walt and I promised each other after his dad having a very serious illness was that we weren't going to get sick. We just sort of promised each other that that was not what we were going to do in our lives. We didn't need it. We didn't want it. We are going to be healthy beings, and knock on wood, We are.
Yeah, we're continuing to be, and I always think in terms of just being well, and you do too, I know. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I mean, you work in daycare, for goodness sake. And in daycare, you're exposed to just about every known virus in human history. And how rarely do you bring something home that infects us? Most of the time, we get away with no problem, even though the kids are running noses and
pink eye,
staff are out on illness leave, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
You're the one filling in. So yeah, we're still learning, but we're learning it works. It applies. And I know that the other part, this is the part that I really do want to talk about, and it's the difficult part. It's the part that nobody else wants to talk about, and very few people are even willing to consider. But LOA works both positively and negatively.
Oh, yeah, it's law of attraction.
It is law of attraction. And it's one of the most difficult things I had to deal with. I mean, you know for sure you were part of this, watching me deal with all this stuff, but the negativity just kept spouting up. And I suspect this is something everybody goes through. The fact that you have to be willing to notice your own negativity, notice when it spouts up, and take the time and energy and effort to redirect it into something positive.
Right.
And it's not easy to do at first, but I don't know, everybody I guess has their own story about how they do it. For me, I think of it in terms of what I call my LOA muscle.
Yeah.
And an LOA muscle is what it sounds like. It's a muscle that if you don't exercise it, it stays flabby and flaccid and doesn't actually do anything.
Doesn't do you any good.
And mine had been flabby and flaccid for most of my life, so it was pretty atrophied. As a result, I constantly had all these thoughts coming along, but I realized that, like any muscle, if you exercise it, over time, it's going to get stronger. And instead of being a 98-pound weakling, you become a 99-pound weakling and a 100-pound weakling until you finally start getting up into the strong range. So that's the way I looked at it. And even though I was only perhaps applying LOA just a few minutes here or a few minutes there, not even consistently every day, but it works. Over time, the muscle does get stronger. So for what it's worth, maybe LOA muscle is a concept that helps you.
Well, what you're describing is something that I used a lot with my clients when I was a therapist. I'm a retired psychotherapist and worked a lot in the drug and alcohol recovery field. And what we talked about very much was strengthening the recovery muscle. And we used to use it specifically, or I did it at least, with reference to using the telephone, that people become isolated in their disease and even in their recovery. And for substance abusers, one of the best ways to reach out is on the phone and to have a list of people you can call. Well, if you're not used to calling people and admitting you're having a hard time or asking for help, reaching for the phone isn't easy. But it was, okay, this is your arm muscle. Pick up that phone, put it to your ear, pick up that phone. Call maybe when you're not feeling desperate, or just call on a daily basis, so that when you are hurting, are tempted, you don't have that resistance. That muscle is strong. You pick up the phone and you make the calls, and that it's a progression of getting better in doing that to help yourself. That maybe you're not picking the phone up every day, but you do it once. Maybe you do it once a week, and then the next week, you do it twice a week, and then you do it 3 times, and it gets easier as you do it. But you have to do something.
Yeah, you do have to do something. I think that's one reason why Mike Dooley just keeps resonating with us. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't watched his videos or listened to his audios or whatever, just listen to him, because even if you're in a bad mood, man, he'll pick you right up.
And the ones we found we liked the most were 4 and 5 and 7-part series presentations. One is at, what's the church where he presented?
Oh, it was the Unity Church in the Hills. I'm not sure where it is. I think it's in California.
Right. And don't be put off. It's not a religious presentation. It's just, that's the venue. But that was, I think, at least a 5-part.
4 or 5 parts,
series on YouTube. And each video was, 5 minutes or
more than that? I think they were like 10 or 15 minutes each one.
15 minutes on that one.
Yeah, so it's almost like an hour by the time you're done.
Right. And then the other one we just finished watching last week was a 7-part series. he was presenting at a bookstore. We think it was
like
the venue.
Yeah.
And it just, we're hungry for more of him in that TV. I watch a lot of TV. I'm trying desperately to find something else to do. I come home at night, I'm tired, I want to just sit and be entertained. Yes, I can do more reading, but I want to sort of veg. But I want to veg with some positive influence behind it. So my wonderful husband here, I think it was initially with Mike Dooley, back 3 or 4 weeks ago before we got into him. It's like, all right, who are some of the authors from The Secret? Do they have any videos? Is there something we could watch to pull us out of the living room and give us something positive to watch? And you located Mike Dooley, and I think it was initially we watched something which was an interview of him or some other presentation which was not very good.
No.
Didn't interest us. And Walt didn't give up, which is part of what the law of attraction talks about. You can't try once and it doesn't happen, you give up. You got to try and try, because those are the baby steps. And you found that multi-part series
right
at the church venue. And then we finished that. We couldn't find anything else. We looked at some of the other authors in the Secret, and nobody resonated.
No.
Nobody had the energy. Nobody had the sense of humor. They were all... It was almost depressing to listen to them talk because they were so energy-less.
Yeah. Well, Jack Canfield actually was pretty
yes.
good.
Oh, that's where we started. That's
yeah.
right. You reminded me. We started with Jack Canfield.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yes, and we ran out of him. You located Mike Dooley. And then again, was it last week or the week before, looking for more Mike Dooley, and we found interviews, but they weren't very good. And I was like, I just walked away and went in the other room and did something else. But Walt was tenacious, and he stayed on the computer until he found something. And you found this 7-part series, and you're like, Louise, come here. I think it's about 5 minutes long. I was like, okay, 5 minutes long. Well, we found 7 5-minute
That's right, yeah.
components to this one long presentation. It's been broken up into smaller ones, I guess, for YouTube's format or whatever. But we just watched in succession each one and got so much out of them. I see you've got his
I've got one
of his books.
I got the second of his Notes from the Universe books. This is more Notes from the Universe. And it could have been any of them, but I just like this one particular note, so I thought I'd share it with everybody, because it really shows how positive he is, and how, not just positive, he is uplifting. He makes you feel better about yourself. That's one of the best things that I think he brings to the table. So I thought I'd just read this one. So this is him speaking as the universe talking to you. And it says, "It's working. No, you probably can't see it yet, but I can. Wheels are now turning that have never turned before. Winds are now howling that have never howled before. And players from every walk of life are being drawn into place as if in some hypnotic dance. All because of you, your dreams, and your divinely stubborn persistence. If I wasn't the universe, I don't think I'd believe it. It's working." I love it. He incorporates humor with positive. What a wonderful combination.
Well, Walt and I have both agreed we would love to meet him and chat with him, because his enthusiasm, his joy, his energy is infectious, and we really, really, really like it. And what little we do know about his story is that prior to starting on this venture, Notes from the Universe, he had moved back home with his parents, I think,
right,
and was fairly depressed.
Yep.
And this came as a result of wanting to get out of that.
He is quite a path.
And if he can do that, so can anyone else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was quite a path he followed, because he was originally out of school an accountant and became a tax auditor. I mean, what a place to come from to approach LOA.
Yeah.
But he was a tax auditor, and he enjoyed it. He says he enjoyed the job. And then after doing that for a while, he decided to go into business with his brother doing that T-shirt business that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And apparently it worked for a while, but then all of a sudden their entire fortunes just reversed. You could see the whole business collapsing before your eyes. And that's when he was in that place that you just described. He's at home, he wasn't sure what to do. He knew he wanted something better in his life. He knew that something better could happen, but he didn't know what, wasn't sure what steps to take. So he just worked with what he had. He had this small mailing list of people who had bought T-shirts. And he said, I'll send them an email. And I'll send them from Mike Dooley. And he did that for a day or two and decided, nah, these people don't want to hear from Mike Dooley. And then one day the idea came to him, what if I write as if I'm the universe? Because that way I can, pretend like I'm God or whatever, and I can take a wider perspective on the whole thing and really share the kinds of thinking that went into what I did with the T-shirts. Because with the T-shirt business, what he did, he was the guy who wrote those phrases that they put on the T-shirts that they sold. And he even said he found that to be limiting because there's only so much space on a T-shirt. And he had all these things he wanted to say. So instead of treating it like a lemon situation, he turned it into a lemonade situation where he said, okay, well, I'm going to just start writing these things. I don't even have much of an audience yet, but I'll just start putting them out there. And here we are, 12, 13 years later, and now he has 500,000 people listening to him every single day.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And you got 2 new listeners within the last month.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're hooked on him now. We're completely. In fact, I don't know if I told you this, but I found a place where I could reach out to Mike and say, hey, we're putting this radio show together.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah. Now, I don't know if he's even seen it.
Uh-huh.
I suspect that somebody like him has so many buffers in place that he gets contacted by so many different people. So I'll probably have to try a number of different venues and just see what I can find as a way to reach him. But hey, I'm going to put it out there. Maybe we can get Mike Dooley on the show. Wouldn't that be cool?
Well, one of the things I wanted to put out there is that one of the things, I guess, was it Jack Canfield talked about was making a list of things. Let's remember going to put that down to talk about Jack Canfield next week.
Okay.
Or the next time we get together on the air. One of my goals was to go to a certain number of LOA presentations in the next year, I think it is, next 2 years. And I'm going to put it out there that within the next year, you and I are going to go to a Mike Dooley presentation. You got to understand, folks, we are broke. I mean, we are really, really broke.
No.
Oh, sorry. We are on the cusp of abundance.
That's right.
We are on the cusp of abundance. So, putting it out there, we don't know how it's going to happen. We don't need to know.
Nope.
But we are going to go to a Mike Dooley presentation within the next year. And maybe that's where you'll be able to invite him to be on the show.
Yeah, that could be. And in line with what we've been talking about, we're not just putting out there that all this money is going to be coming in and all this abundance is going to be coming in. We're also taking steps. I'm self-employed. You have what you're doing with daycare, but you're also dabbling with some self-employed stuff. So we're taking steps, too. We're doing both. And we're not putting a time limit on when it's going to happen. We have a time limit on when we hope it'll happen, but that doesn't mean the universe is going to accommodate us the way we want it to. Nevertheless, we're just putting out there, hey, life is good. We're going to be happy about life. We're just going to keep going, and good things are going to happen.
And something you brought up to me this week, which I had been struggling with but hadn't found the words to, is that when we are asking for something or projecting that this is something we're going to have, we can also say, or something better, or something greater,
I love that one.
Something more. And for me, it was, we're planning to move back to Connecticut, where we met and were living at the time that we got married, and thinking about a house. What kind of house do we want? And I've been trying to come up with specifics, but it just didn't feel right to limit myself to this is exactly what I want.
Right.
I don't know specifically what I want. And when you were talking about that, and Mike Dooley was talking about leave the particulars, the details up to the universe.
Right.
I was like, okay, that makes sense. I know how many bedrooms, I know certain aspects that I want the house to have, but I don't want to go to a magazine like we know somebody else did. But I want to leave space for the universe, who knows me better, knows us better, knows our needs better, our wants and our desires, to come up with something fantastic, probably better than I could in my limited view of things.
Absolutely.
So being able to put out there that this is what we want, this is what we need, or something better or more, to leave the door open.
And we're not saying there's anything wrong with asking for specifics. I mean, absolutely, you can ask for specifics. You can be as detailed as you want, and certainly that helps.
Right.
But there's also room for saying, hey, universe, you've got a better perspective than I do. Here's what I have in mind, but if you've got something better, tell me, bring it here, let's do it. Because I'm really open to something that's even better than that. My imagination's limited. Help me out here.
That's it. I don't know all the options.
Yeah.
I don't know all the possibilities. I can't see what may be down the road in the future, like in housing, what new innovations might there be, or new techniques in renovating.
New features that we haven't thought about.
Not even aware of.
Smart homes comes to mind, where they wire the house together. We haven't even talked about that, but maybe that's something, some feature that we like. We want to include something like that.
Want to leave the door open.
Yep.
Not be so limiting in that respect.
As we've been going almost a full hour now, and as I've been thinking back to what we've talked about here, I realized we had that real embarrassing first 7 minutes of blankness because I didn't realize that I didn't have the mic set up properly and the connection set up properly. And while you heard 7 minutes of blank, we were actually talking. We thought we were on the air. During that time, we talked about who our co-host would be, but I don't think we've done it since we actually got on the air.
I don't think we have either.
So let's mention that.
Bad.
One thing that we're planning to do is, once we get this little connection issue figured out so we can bring in a phone line, is my brother Mark and his lady Ioana also want to be a part of this. In fact, when we told Mark what our idea was, he said, wow, that sounds great. And he was instantly on board. Of course, Ioana was on board immediately afterwards. So as soon as we get the connection issue figured out, we're going to include them probably in the next broadcast. And if you think 2 of us are too much energy to handle, wait till you get 4 of us on the same call.
And you have a special guest who has already said he would be on the show.
Right, yeah.
So please tell him.
I think I actually covered this while we had our live broadcast, but I can't remember what his name is. Dan's his first name, but he's the guy who was behind The Secret going viral. Mm-hmm. And he has an amazing story to tell. Also a rather sad story to tell where Rhonda Byrne is concerned, although he can't tell very much because of certain legal limitations that are in the way. But what I will do at some point is I'll direct you to an article that you can find in an Australian magazine that will tell you the details about what really happened with Rhonda Byrne. And it's one of those stories that's kind of sad because here's the lady who did so much to bring The Secret to the world, and we realize through the story that she didn't really learn her own lesson. It's very, very sad. But anyway, that's for another time. What else do we want to talk about today? Because we've done our hour. We can keep going, but I think we probably just about run out of things we're going to talk about.
For today, I think so.
We've already got the one thing we want to talk about. We want to talk more about Jack Canfield next time.
Right. And we wanted to thank all of you who listened. And if you did enjoy this show and found it helpful or interesting or intriguing, please tell your friends, because the more people know about us, the wider the support base can be for us and for you and for anybody else out there.
We also have a Twitter account set up. You can follow us on Twitter at, I'm stumbling over my own words, at LOA Today Radio. That's the Twitter handle, LOA Today Radio. So feel free to follow us, and we'll watch for people who follow us and follow back so you can send us messages too. We'll also be available through the website. Right now there's no contact information on there, but there will be. I have an email address set up for myself. You can reach me, walt@loatoday.net. We will set up an address for Louise. It isn't set up yet, but we'll announce that as soon as we've got that set up. So a couple ways you can reach us.
And please send us topics that you would like us to cover, and authors or presenters that you have found particularly helpful or inspiring or energizing. The more information we can share with each other, again, the more support that we have
And the better off we'll all be.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Much.
And one other thing before we sign off, we started off with a theme song, and I wanted to tell you about the theme song,
yes.
where it came from, and we're going to end with it as well. If you have a bad day or you have a day where you just need a pick-me-up, go onto YouTube and do a search for the words "spread joy." That's what I did one day when we were watching TV. You were talking earlier about how we're constantly hooked on the TV and we're trying to get off of it. Well, that particular day I just couldn't handle it anymore, so I came into the room where the computer is and did a search on YouTube for joy and ended up finding this particular video. It's a cute video. Skip the first 20 seconds. It's kind of a violent presentation there. He does that to set up the real beauty of the rest of the video. It includes a song that this guy named Mike Strickland wrote. I believe Mike's from Mississippi, I think, somewhere in the South. And it's just this really light, happy tune to remind everybody that the value of spreading joy. Because the more joy you spread, the more joy comes back to you. So that's why we decided to use it as our theme song. Plus, Mike made it available public domain. All he asked was for some recognition. So, Mike, if you hear this broadcast, thank you for making the song. It's wonderful, and you're going to be part of our broadcast for many years to come. So I think that's about it.
We thank you very much and look forward to, we'll be letting you know through the website when the next broadcast will be.
Right.
We don't have a specific schedule set up yet. We're doing this
for fun.
For fun, when we can get together and do it. It more than likely will be on the weekends because of my job.
Probably, yeah.
My work hours. But who knows? So thanks. We're recording this.
We are recording this, so this will be available for podcast, as will all of our broadcasts. So check it out on the website. And in addition to looking at the website, like I said, follow us on Twitter at LOA Today Radio, and we will put out notifications there about any upcoming broadcasts. So I think that's about it.
That's it. Have a joyful week, and
we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.